Hello, everybody. Linda Bloom here with my honey Charlie.
Hello there.
And welcome to Bloom Talks. And we are here to talk with you today about, I know what I need to do. How come I can't do it? So the real reason why we have a commitment, which is our spoken conscious commitment, and we have trouble implementing that commitment, is there's some things in the shadow that aren't quite as accessible or available. And digging around down there to find out what they are can really free up some energy, some really creative energy, if we know what they are. And I think it's so apropos of this season, right here at the beginning of the year, when so many people are making their New Year's resolutions, and people sometimes make the same resolutions many years in a row, several years in a row. I'm going to go to the gym more often, and I'm going to get in shape, and I'm going to take off that 10 pounds. And I really want my relationship to be a higher priority. And there's some old things from the past that are haunting me, and I just want to let go of them. And people are very well-meaning when they speak to themselves about the things that they really want to do, because they know that they will enhance their life. And our friends are really well-meaning when they give us support and they say, just let go, get over it, forgive, move on, don't manipulate, be honest, speak the truth, open up, be transparent. And all those things are good advice, but sometimes we have trouble implementing them. And so we want to investigate what is going on below the surface. If we think of our conscious commitment as the tip of the iceberg that's showing, and that there's some things going on underneath the surface that are not so visible, but are very important, and we have an attitude of curiosity and wonder about what those are, it can get us out of that negative mind state that says, oh, you really don't want it that badly, or else it would be manifesting. You're really not committed to it. Oh, you're lazy. Those are not true, and they're not helpful to be self-condemning. So when we speak to ourselves, to be very compassionate and to be curious about, well, what else is over there? What else is under there? What else is the commitment that I might not be as in touch with, because that's part of the process of freeing ourselves to go on to manifest the things that we really want in our life.
We do these talks on the basis of what it is that we think people might find relevant or of value for them. And one of the ways that we get to find that out is by noticing, we've been blogging for a few years, different websites. And one of the ways we get to find out what people are interested in is by noticing the response to our blogs. And this particular subject about what we are going to be referring to as competing commitments, those things that seem to get in the way of us fulfilling our conscious or primary commitments, our intention. That subject drew a huge number of responses. And so we're going to give you the video version of the blog today. And, like Linda said, it's very easy for us to get surprised or disappointed or, even self-critical when we don't do those things that seem to be so obvious, that we feel ourselves to really be committed to. I really want this badly, and there's no reason why, I shouldn't just put my attention on this intention and fulfill it. And sometimes we do, but sometimes we don't. And what we're going to be looking at today is what those factors are that prevent us from doing what we tell ourselves really is important to us. Because in most cases, it really is important. Mm-hmm. It's not that we don't want it badly enough. It's not. It's not that we're not trying hard enough. It's not that there's something wrong with us. But what it generally has to do with is a competing commitment. That is a counter commitment, an intention most of the time that we're not conscious of, we're not aware of, that is pulling us away from our stated conscious desire. So we're going to be talking a little bit today about how to recognize if that is the case, how to identify what that competing commitment might be, and then how do I deal with that? Because it's not a matter of one or the other. It's a matter of somehow coming to terms with the contradictory or paradoxical reality that I have two competing, conflicting desires, each one of which is demanding some attention from me.
Mm-hmm. So I love examples. I'm a concrete thinker. So I love it when people are teaching me with examples, so I tend to offer them. If one of our New Year's resolutions is I want to be more fit, I want to work out more frequently, and you find that you have trouble schlepping yourself to the weight room early in the morning, maybe you want to do it at a different time of day. Maybe the competing commitment is it's boring, or I don't want to have to get up that early, or maybe we need to look and see that there is some form of exercise that would be more enjoyable to us. If we find that it's boring in the weight room, maybe we want to hike, maybe we want to climb, maybe we want to bicycle, maybe we want to dance. There's so many ways that we can manifest it, but we have to tell the truth. If we're trying to force ourselves to do it and it's not working, what else is going on under there? If we're denying ourselves too much food, for instance, because we want to have weight loss, there may be some things that it would be more pleasurable to have some really interesting food that would be satisfying with smaller portions. If it's a way we take care of ourselves, maybe we need to knock off of work early or have more fun in our life so that we're not rewarding ourselves with food so much. And then about relationships, if we feel that it would really enhance our relationship to be more transparent, to be more open, to be more vulnerable, and we find that we're holding back, there are some fears underneath, that we are fearing rejection, we're fearing criticism. If we can tell ourselves the truth about that, and then gently, slowly press that edge of our comfort zone to reveal more to trusted people, hopefully our partner is one of those trusted people, and speak about what we fear and what it activates in us when we might have been humiliated or criticized or judged or in some way treated badly when we were open. That can make all the difference, but it all starts with telling ourselves the truth first. And this is one of the pieces of shadow work, is taking the contemplative pause, disconnecting from all the busyness of our life to have a meditative, reflective pause to see what else is going on underneath the surface. What am I feeling? What am I needing? What am I afraid of? What is my concern that made me hold me back from just the sheer act of will? Now, I want to go on the record here as will, commitment, and intentionality, I think is very powerful, but it can't take us all the way to that place of well-being that we deeply desire. There's some shadow work that needs to be done. We need to get down there in the dark recesses and see what else is going on.
So speaking of commitments, most of us also have a commitment to keeping our shadow commitments, our unconscious competing commitments, in the shadow. We don't want to expose them. Mm-hmm. We don't want others to see that we may have desires or predispositions or feelings or fears that could cause them to see us with some disdain. We also have a commitment to keep it not only from other people, but to keep information about us that we may feel is conflicting with our own self-image from ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, most of us would like to see ourselves as being good people, in however way we describe that, whatever qualities good people have, that we're caring, we're kind, we're resourceful, we're generous, we're loving. And, there's reasons for that. We want to think of ourselves as being that way because it feels good. It confirms our sense of what makes us a worthwhile person. But also because we may have a fear that if other aspects of myself are exposed to other people, like the fact that I can sometimes be selfish, that sometimes I can be greedy, that sometimes I can be apathetic or uncaring, that sometimes I can do or say things that are just kind of dumb. So we're not really talking so much about behaviors, but just about qualities within us that we prefer to keep hidden from others and from ourselves. Mm-hmm. And these competing commitments often go in that category, not because we're necessarily ashamed to admit it, but because when we compartmentalize in our own lives what it is that we want to share with people, how we want to be seen, as opposed to how we don't want to be seen, then we're naturally going to make distinctions between what I feel free to expose to myself and to other people, and what I choose to conceal. So this is a process that we refer to as not so much about search and destroy, but about search and befriend. That is, to befriend, to accept, to even appreciate those aspects of myself, some of which I might feel other people might disapprove of, but to be willing to acknowledge and accept that without shame or apologies.
So I have an example for that. It's not an example about myself. It's a woman that I was speaking with at a New Year's Eve party. And she knows herself well enough to know that organization is not a strength of hers. Being organized is a real signature strength for me. But this particular woman said, every New Year's Eve for years now, I've been saying, this year I'm going to be more organized. And I'm not doing it this year because I never really get much more organized than I was before. And I end up feeling bad about myself that I failed. And I feel so disappointed and discouraged. I ended up talking mean to myself about it. And she said, I've decided that this year I'm going to accept that I have other strengths and organization is not one of them. And I'm just going to throw some money at the problem. And in my business and in my home, I'm going to buy people who are really disorganized to keep my house in order and keep my business in order.
Organized, not
more. Yes, more organized. And I'm going to really enjoy this year because I'm not going to be beating myself up about how I'm failing at organization. And so I thought, she knows herself well. And she's really working with accepting that we're all such a mixed bag. We have our signature strengths and we have our weak areas. And I didn't get the impression that she was totally giving up on ever getting better, but she was being more realistic and being self-soothing, being self-honoring, being self-respecting, knowing this about herself and making a very conscious choice to compensate for it by having other people fill in where she's not so adept.
So to bring this to a more personal level for you, particularly if you're in a relationship or, just think of any relationship that you may be in, because we're all in various relationships. You might want to consider the question of whether there is anything that you have ever thought of that you think you could provide for this relationship that could in some way enhance it, make it feel more accepting, make it feel safer for both of you, bring about a deeper level of trust, heighten the sense of respect, and anything at all that you have ever thought of that you haven't actually provided for to the degree that you could. Not saying that you haven't done anything, but being honest with yourself, is there more that you could have done that some competing commitment may have gotten in the way of you doing? And if you have identified that, if you have identified something that you could have brought, that you could still bring to it, but you haven't, see if you can recognize if there is a fear or anything about the possibility of doing that could leave you feeling uncomfortable or threatened, or something that you don't want to experience. What would be involved in you doing it? If you were to do that, is there a downside to that? Just to see if you could identify what might be in your own way. And what's key about this little exercise is that you would do it without any judgment. Mm-hmm. It's not about finding yourself guilty of something, finding fault. Oh, I should have done that. I should have known that. Whatever. It's just about discovering what might be there that lies below your conscious thinking. When we have some fear about, when we don't trust ourselves to be compassionate and accepting of ourselves, if we see something about ourselves that we don't like, then we're going to resist going there. We're going to resist that exploration. We're going to resist that search. But if you feel like you can trust yourself to see something, even though it's not necessarily flattering your sense of who you are, but it is honest and it is important information, you might be able to access more of that than if you feel like you might be angry or punitive with yourself if you see something. So just see what's there, and then see if you can come up with some way of being able to honor that concern without going over a line that you're just not willing to go over right now. See if you can honor that concern without neglecting your conscious primary intention.
So what Charlie's talking about here is a mindfulness practice. It's just paying attention to our own experience, particularly our inner life, but without any blame and judgment. We mustn't talk mean to ourselves. Bringing our attention to our inner life with curiosity and wonder makes all the difference. So sometimes when we take a look at what our weak suits are, our shortcomings, or the things that we haven't manifested that we would really like to, we have a tendency to be the strict authoritarian parent who wants to discipline us, and whip us into shape. And that's not going to be helpful. In fact, it slows down the process. It makes people tense. It makes people ashamed. It makes people close up. We want to be the good parent. We want to be the honoring, respectful parent. We want to be the nurturant parent to ourselves, to be able to speak the truth, that this is something that I want, but I haven't been able to manifest it. What else is going on there? What may be holding me back? And to be kindly about it. Now, Charlie's the introvert, so he would do this more in silence. Maybe he'd journal. I'm the extrovert, so I like to do a talking meditation. And so I will do it with him. I will do it with my trusted women friends. I will speak about and explore what could be holding me back from this intention that I have. My spoken conscious commitment and explore it. And I ask them to support me by asking probing questions. And I can do that for myself too. What else is going on here? What may be holding me back? But not in a judgmental way, nothing punitive about it. Now, I want to mention to you that I love self-help books. I own hundreds of them. My library's full of them. We write them, but they sometimes can compound the problem that people already have about being judgmental of themselves, because they read this profound wisdom in the self-help book about forgiveness and freedom and responsibility and just let go and move on and don't be defined by your past. And they find that they're still feeling stuck or they're moving at a snail's pace. And so Charlie and I both feel very strongly this examining with mindfulness the missing link, the competing commitments that are below the surface, will free us up. It is true in my experience. It's true in Charlie's experience. It's true with the people that we've worked with in counseling, the people that we have worked with in our classes. If they, with mindfulness, dig down into the shadow to see what else is going on there that may be slowing them down. They're trying to climb with a 100-pound pack in their back. What needs to be unpacked? What needs to be looked at? What needs to be investigated so that we can travel lighter in this life? And that will allow, if you go back and read the self-help books with this missing component, that will allow some of the wisdom in the self-help books to actually occur in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, you may be thinking right now like you might have thought if you have read any self-help books, well, that makes sense, and I can understand how that would work, and I know I can do that, and that's something that I want to do. And you may do it. But there's also that chance that there may be some hidden resistance there that you're not even aware of. And this is not so much about making changes, particularly in your behavior. The behavioral changes come about naturally, inevitably, as a result of making the internal shift from relating to yourself from the perspective of an observer, rather than relating from yourself from the perspective of a judge or a critic. So an observer is simply recording data, simply becoming aware of what it is that's happening, noting it, recording it, acknowledging it. Okay, this is what was spoken. This is what's happening. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm perceiving. And when we can bring that attitude of non-judgment and simply clear awareness of what's going on, then we're able to relate to ourselves in a way that doesn't feel critical. I mean, we can tense up just as much when we're looking at ourselves as when somebody else is giving us negative feedback, because we're kind of bracing ourselves for, the bad news and preparing a defense to justify our position. But what we're talking about here is shifting from that perspective of being the judge, the critic, the analyzer, the evaluator, who's saying good, bad, yes, no, right, wrong, I like it, don't like it, to the observer, and to be willing to acknowledge what we're observing. And of course, acknowledging it to ourselves is a key step. It's the first step in the process. But then the next step, which can feel a little bit riskier, and that's part of what this process involves, and part of why we may have some resistance to it, is because there's always something at stake. There is some risk involved in acknowledging to somebody else what I'm feeling, particularly if it's a feeling that I don't think is going to be particularly socially acceptable or approvable. So, for instance, if I notice that I'm feeling jealous of my partner when she's talking to somebody at a party, and that feels like it's kind of embarrassing to admit that because it makes me seem sort of controlling or insecure. So there's some risk involved in that. If I acknowledge that I have some fear about doing something, then that feels kind of risky too, because I don't want to be seen as somebody who's fear-driven or fear-based or who even experiences fear, or anything that I think conflicts with or challenges the personal and public view that I want people to have of me, that I want to have of myself. So don't be surprised if you feel like in trying to do this process and trying to engage in this self-reflection that there's more resistance than it seems like there should be. There's naturally going to be some. Just try to hang in there and don't push it, but try to be more accepting.
It's a bit like getting out there on the shaky branches. It's a bit risky. And one of the reasons that we might want to remind ourselves when it feels a little edgy that there's some big payoffs for doing this shadow work and for looking underneath the surface to see what else is going on there. And from my point of view, it's not just about being able to manifest the results that we want to manifest in our life and accomplish those tasks that we want to accomplish in our life. What we're speaking about here is having a more intimate relationship with ourselves, which is the prerequisite for having a more intimate relationship with others. When we cultivate more acceptance and tolerance and respect for self, so more self-trust, we have more tolerance and acceptance and trust and respect for other. So when you expose more of your shadow to yourself and then your partner and your close, intimate confidants, when they express love to you, you don't have to be haunted by the if only they knew. You can be nourished by the love that they're sending to you because they know who you are. They know that you're a mixed bag. They know that they're a mixed bag. They know that we all have our strengths and our weaknesses. So if one of the things that you want to do in the new year is to be more generous with your love, to show attention to other people, that will enhance your relationship. And if there are some fears and trepidations about doing that, knowing what they are, specifically what they are, and naming them, coming out of the closet about what those are, that's very intimate relating. And it's a bit risky, but the payoffs can be really significant. So we wish that for you in the new year.
So speaking of which, we will not be back here next week or the following week. So the next time we're going to be speaking to you on Facebook Live is going to be 3 weeks from today, which is January 25th, where the subject is going to be, can this marriage be saved? For those of you, by the way, who live in New York area or the Northeast or New England, who are probably freezing right about now.
Yeah.
We're going to be teaching at Kripalu, not this coming weekend, but the weekend of the 12th to the 14th. And we still have a few openings in that course, which is entitled The Secrets of Great Relationships. So contact Kripalu and see if you can get yourself in there. We'd love to see you in person.
I want to say.
Okay.
And if you miss us over the next 2 weeks, you can go to Facebook Live to the archives or to bloomwork.com because we've got videos on there and all the blog sites where we blog. So you could fill in by having some other ways of being with us while we're on the East Coast. And we'll see you on the 25th. Tell your friends about the free samples so they'll tune in.